Welcome, everyone. This is Charm Penawort from MediaStream, and today we have a very special guest. Dr. Kelly Miller joins us from Saving Your Brain in Florida and Kansas City. He has 3 locations, and he is the brain expert. Today, we're going to be talking about reading problems or dyslexia, and we'll have him join us right now. Welcome, Dr. Miller. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Charn. I'm really
Yeah, we're
excited
excited.
about talking about dyslexia today because I think it's probably one of the most underdiagnosed problems that's out there today in
Right.
children and adults.
For sure. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is Facebook Live, so you can tune in and share with your friends via your Facebook page. However, we do have this recorded as well. We've done a number of webinars with Dr. Miller, so he has a YouTube channel. Visit his website at savingyourbrain.com to view all the other webinars, and stay to the end because at the end we do have special offers and discounts from Dr. Kelly Miller at Saving Your Brain. So, of course, you are the founder of Saving Your Brain 3 centers, Amazon bestseller author. You've written 7 other health books, plus 43 years of clinical experience. You're speaker, author, brain expert, and certified in the Melillo method. I know we kind of talked about it in other webinars, but can you briefly tell us what that is and how important that is in your diagnosis of or treatment of dyslexia?
Yes, I've done training at Carrick Institute, but I also did a fellowship with Robert Melillo. And Robert Melillo is the author of Disconnected Kids, Reconnected Kids, and a textbook on autism. So I really recommend any parents listening here, if they want to kind of get a little better handle on what's going on with their child who's having learning or behavioral problems, to read the book Disconnected Kids. But as I said, I did a fellowship with him and probably talk to him on a weekly basis. It's one of the leading experts in the world and one of my mentors. And we use a lot of his methodology in our treatment protocols.
Great. Well, let's get started and let's have you.
Yeah, so in today's world, if we look at kind of children generally today, if we look at the ADHD classification, probably 10% of the children in today's world are classified as ADHD, and this is like 4 to 1 boys. And in autism, we now are up to 2.5%. 40 years ago, we had autism was like 1 in 10,000, even 30 years ago. So this is really on the increase. But the biggest pool of all is dyslexia. And, even early on in my practice, before I really studied the brain, I just thought dyslexia is like when you confuse numbers, reverse numbers, or reverse letters. But it's really a lot more to that. And we're going to dive into that in a bit. So actually, dyslexia is a language-based learning disability. And it doesn't go away. I mean, people can adapt and they can be successful. And, one of the things about, I guess there's connotations or people think if they have a diagnosis, something like this, that they're not intelligent. That is very far from the truth. In fact, many people who have dyslexia are extremely intelligent, and they're have very good skill sets in a lot of different ways. But lots of times they're having problems with spelling, writing, and speaking. And this is something that goes into, if isn't corrected, goes into as they become an adult. So we don't grow out of it. So dyslexia, defined by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, indicates that it's a specific learning disability that is neurological in origin. And there's usually difficulties and phonological components of language, and we're going to look into that a little bit more, especially why English is so challenging with dyslexia or creating so many problems. But again, this can affect, many times this affects their reading speed and reading comprehension, and just makes reading stressful. So, it impedes many times the growth of their vocabulary and background knowledge. Again, dyslexia, like we talked about, ADHD and autism is more common in boys. And again, this is something that can occur. And even though there's very good intelligence or even superior intelligence, and again, these people can be extremely successful in many of the other areas, which we're going to cover in a little bit here. So how widespread is dyslexia? We're going to look at a slide later on that actually breaks down in the countries. But generally, it's about 15-20% of the population has a reading disability. And of these, probably 85% are dyslexic. And it's very common that this runs in families. And if mom and dad are dyslexic, very common that the child is going to be dyslexic. And as we look at this, and we're going to talk about hemispheric balance and strength. And really, in dyslexia, this is a left brain weakness, like its counterpart called dyscalculia, which is a kind of like dyslexia for math. Again, left brain weakness, whereas ADHD and autism are right brain weakness. So we're going to get it, kind of talk about that a little bit more. But again, people who are dyslexics are often gifted in areas that don't require strong language skills, such as art, computer science, design, drama, electronics, math, mechanics, music, physics, sales, and sports. So there's different specific testing to figure out if you're dyslexic. And we do that testing. And we're also going to talk about some other type testing that sometimes parents go to if they go to a child neuropsychologist. So this is Wyatt testing. And this is something like in one of my offices in Naples. I'm in the building where a child neuropsychologist practices, and he does this kind of testing or similar testing, very extensive testing on children to figure out what's going on with them. And if we look at the next slide, we'll actually see the Wyatt test. This is a before and after on an individual, and the Wyatt stands for the Weschler Individualize Achievement Test. But we can see that over a period of a few months that this individual has increased dramatically in their knowledge, base of 3 to 4 years in some areas after just a few months. So we see that many times when we see children, they may be at stuck at a third grade level, and they're chronologically older than that. In just a few months, they can go up to 5th grade, 6th grade, or 7th grade. This is the next one. This is more common when I grew up. This is the more common kind of report cards in grade school we had. And so basically we either had satisfaction or needs work, or in this one, this is meets expectations. So again, that's the teachers judging that based on their age and this school level that they're doing, the work adequately that they should be. And R means requires extra support. So if we see this individual here in January, we see the vast majority of these are rated as an R, needs more work. And we don't see really much change at 3-month mark, but at the 6-month mark, we see vast changes. And a lot of that has to do with the neuroplastic changes that are created in the brain. When we create a new thought or a new pattern, it grows for 21 days. And if it's reinforced over another period of 3 21-day periods, so now we're at 3-month mark, now it's got kind of stickiness. And then as we continue to work, then that pathway gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's say we start, we build a 2-lane highway, and then after a few more months, we can make that into a 4 or 6-lane highway. So that network is working much better. So one of the things we use in our office is something called brain mapping. And this is something I'm actually doing some research right on, and we're right now, and we're talking about delta being present in these different children who have problems like ADHD. In this case, we're talking about dyslexia. And this is just another report that's out there that indicates this. And in fact, we see many times, we see delta, which is a slow brain wave activity, more on the left and the right over these reading language areas in the brain. And on the next slide, this is just this shows we do a 19-point brain scan, and we can see that in this particular one, we have lots of red and yellow, and green would be normal. And then the red is high, and then the yellow is very high. And we see a little bit more yellow on the left than the right in this one, which would go along with a left hemispheric weakness like we would see in dyslexia or reading problems. So we're going to talk a little bit more about brain waves, just kind of educate you a little bit. But we're actually, there's 5 different brain waves that we measure in QEEG. And they're all important. But as we develop, we actually develop certain brain waves more in our early neural development. And like when we're in from 0 to 2 years old, most babies sleep like 18, 20 hours a day. A lot of sleep. So delta is a slow brainwave activity, and there's a lot of delta brainwave activity in children at that age. And then from age 2 to 6, we start getting a little faster brain waves. We see the theta brain waves. And then from age 6 to 10, we see alpha waves, which are even faster brain waves. And that's kind of the resting speed of our brain, around 10 and a half hertz. And then after age 10, we see more development of the beta waves, low beta and then higher beta. And we're going to talk about that again a little bit when we do a brainwave on a QEEG on these type patients with some of the things we see. So we're going to talk a little bit about primitive reflexes. So these are things that we see early in life. Like if we put our finger in a baby's hand, they're going to clasp it. When a baby's nursing, the first few months, if you touch their cheek, they'll turn their head and open their mouth. So there's about 10 of these reflexes, and we see the startle reflex. The baby will hear a big noise and they'll arch their back and put their hands out. So there's about 10 of these, and they go away at different periods, but they should pretty much be all gone by 12 to 18 months. And what we see in these children with learning and behavioral problems is they all have retained primitive reflexes. And that's significant in a couple different regions, for a couple different reasons, which we'll talk about in the next slides. But again, as we said, most of these primitive reflexes should go away. And if they don't, they're associated with certain abnormal neurobehaviors. I'll say they're a little quirky. And so the stronger the reflex and the more reflexes, the kind of quirkier the child will be. And what it indicates is that there was a lack of maturation in the brainstem. And the significance of that is that our brainstem is like the foundation to the brain, just like the foundation is to our house. So let's imagine that we were going to build a new house. We picked out our lot and we dug the dirt out, and then we poured the concrete, but they didn't pack down the dirt. And so we built the house, we put a floor on it that's kind of like the cerebellum. We put walls up, that's like our oculomotor and vestibular systems. We put a ceiling on it, we put a roof on it, which is like our frontal cortex. And then it started raining. Well, that foundation cracked because the dirt underneath it wasn't supporting it. So, and now we have a slope floor. Now we have cracks in the drywalls, inner ceilings, inner walls. And that's kind of like what happens with the brain when the brainstem isn't mature, that these other systems that are built on it, like the balance system and the oculomotor system and the vestibular system, are on shaky ground. And the other thing that indicates is when there's a lack of maturation of the brainstem is that the vagus nerve isn't fully developed, and the vagus nerve controls what's known as our parasympathetic nervous system. It's the rest and digest part of our nervous system. It's the calming part. It's the braking system. So we have the fight flight is what's like the accelerator, and we have the parasympathetic, which is like the braking system. So it's not working right. So it's very common that these children are running a little high strung, easier for them to get stressed out, harder for them to wind down, and many times they have sleeping problems. And the other issue in the next slide that we'll talk about is many times we'll see very big pupils in these children. And again, the significance of this primitive reflexes and the brainstem not being mature is that we'll see an asymmetrical growth in the brain, and one side will take off faster than the other, and they will lose proper communication. And if one side is much stronger than the other, then it doesn't get listen to the other part of the brain appropriately. So as we talked about before, the brain's built on three systems: our postural system, vestibular system, and our oculomotor system. And in the next slide, we'll talk about because of this, because we have a problem in the brainstem, because these children all have primitive reflexes, we do a bottom-up therapy. It means we're going to treat the brainstem, treat the cerebellum, treat these levels of the brain as they mature. And then we're also treating the left and right side of the brain to get them communicating better, because one side's stronger than the other. And then we're working on top-down therapy. So as we get better communication up, side to side, we're getting better top-down regulation and decision-making. So again, this is just some research again showing that really our best approach in treating brain is always doing a vertical approach, up or down, and then also horizontal, left or right. So the proper left and right integration involves abilities that require input from both sides for optimal functioning. And, the left-right connection allows us to put feelings into words and consider our feelings in conscious awareness. There's sometimes this functional disconnection syndrome can create something called alexithymia, which is the inability to put words to feelings, and can also create what's known as somatization, and that's when we have emotional conflicts. We have lots of physical ailments or pains in the body. And again, there's a lot of evidence that depression and mania are correlated because of a problem between the communication in the left and right brain. So as we talked about before, this is another research that's just showing dyscalculia. So when we talk about dyslexia, that's a reading problem, reading comprehension. This dyscalculia is also a left brain weakness, and it just has to do with the part of the brain that works with the mathematics. So typically a child will do okay with, let's say, addition, then they go to subtraction or multiplication, division, and many times they'll get confused and they kind of revert back to the addition. So if you look at a child's doing a problem, and if you look at it, they may be doing it as an addition problem rather than a subtraction or multiplication or division. That's a common thing. But again, I once had a brother and a sister. The brother was dyslexic and the sister had dyscalculia. And in a few months, their grades came way up and they were performing as the best of their peers in their class. So this is kind of talking about a little bit about different languages in dyslexia. So we're actually speaking English is inherently kind of difficult. When we look at some of these countries, like if we look at Italy, for example, and we're going to use an analogy with them, you know, their numbers are way down. And there's a reason for that is that, and we'll look in the next slide, is that we have in the English language, we have almost 1,100 different ways to say 44 different sounds. Whereas in Italy, they have 33 different ways to say 25 different sounds. So in the English language, practically 25% of our words are not phonetically irregular. So we have all these words, as in the slide says, debt, yacht, onion, etc. And you have all these words that have multiple meanings, like tear, tear, bass, bass, wind, wind. You know, one is a verb and one is a noun. So when people have these little weaknesses, these things are really, idiosyncrasies are really challenging to them. And here's just an example, and they call this orthography, and that's the phonetics. Orthography means, you know, consistent. Okay, how many different ways can you say an O? Or how many ways can you say a different I? But this is just showing you, if we were like the GH sound in enough is pronounced like an F, and the O in women makes the short I sound, and the TI in nation is pronounced sh, then this word is spelled goatee is pronounced just like fish. And that's what happens literally when these people that have these reading problems, this is kind of how they see the words. So it's very confusing for them. So the next slide, you know, depending on who the child is seeing, they may get a combination of different diagnosis. And these are some of the different components of learning, reading, learning, and speaking, processing speed. Just they could be reading slower. Visual processing, they may not be processing the words appropriately. Auditory processing. So lots of times these children have trouble screening out other noises in the classroom from other students or whatever, and just focusing and not hearing the teacher. So visual perception disability, visual motor integration, phonological awareness, dyspraxia, dysgraphia. So dysgraphia might be they really have trouble writing their letters. They get confused. The B and the D are reversed and things like that. And that's some integration from what's called the parietal part of the brain. But motor planning, oral motor apraxia, limb apraxia, which is just a disconnection to them having be disconnected from their arm appropriately and positioning and things, and comprehension and global or versus local processing. So in this webinar, we're not going to get into a big detail. We actually may, Charm, just do like a little separate 10 or 15 minutes on just all these different things and help them define for people. But I just want to put it out this point that they may get a report from someone that they've seen, and they may have some of these things listed in there. But it's kind of all encompassing under this dyslexia. And again, what we see with people, one of the things is that we see slow reading. And one of the things that we do, we're going to show an instrument we use called the right eye, and it measures different eye movements, which we'll show in there, but it also shows how the eyes are moving along as they're reading. And it also will calculate how many words per minute they're actually reading versus what is considered average in that age group. But this is very common. This reading is a lot slower, and also rereading certain areas. Okay, next slide. So this is another instrument we use not only to diagnose the timing and synchronization and coordination between the cerebellum and opposite parietal and frontal cortex, but this is something that actually helps improve language and reading impairments. This little device, which we'll show a picture in the next slide, and it's just the person, the child will watch a screen, and they're going to clap their hands or clap one or tap their foot to a beat, a cowbell, if you would. I think we have a slide on this in the next one there. Yeah. We need to put them on the screen. So they've got, this child's got it in his left hand, but many times we're going to work on the worst side. So if we're working on someone that has dyslexia, we're going to work a lot on their right side. And we're going to put more hearing on their right side, and we're going to have them work their right hand, right foot, so that we can put more sensory input into the left brain. But this little interactive metronome, which we have, and the other great thing about it is we have many patients that come in from out of town, and we can, for what we call intensives, so we may assess them and treat them for 1 to 2 weeks and send them with some home therapy. And this is a home therapy that can be done as well. So this is a right eye. This is a older patient, but again, older patients, if they had dyslexia when they were a child, they still have dyslexia. And this actually has an infrared camera, and we'll see in the next slide, we'll see a readout from that. And basically, when we're looking at with this device, we're measuring 3 different components of sight. One is fixation, just the ability to stay focused on a specific area. And one is called saccades, and that's moving from target to target. And this is a function that we do when we're reading. We actually read text like this, like we kind of go there, and we go, that's how we read it. So if the person is having that saccade, another function of saccade would be like I'm pulled up to a traffic stop, and I have traffic coming from the left and traffic from the right. So I have to look at the left, how far away is that car, look to the right. And if that part of my vision, which is controlled by a different part of the brain, isn't working right, I can't calculate the speed appropriately and distance those cars are closing, and it might be increased risk for having a car crash. And the other one is pursuit. So that's just looking at something like if you're watching a car drive by, watching a train go by, watching a bird fly. It's just a steady flight. So each of these are controlled by different parts of the brain. So it kind of gives us some insight on some of the functions of whether it's the brainstem or the cerebellum or the parietal or the frontal cortex. And this is just another study which we were showing about that part of the problem in some of the children is that they're not being able to auditorily screen out these other sounds, and they can't focus, and that's creating a big learning problem for them. So every child is a little different. Every child is unique, and and every child has strengths and weaknesses. In fact, as we said several times, people who have certain learning disabilities, reading comprehension things, can be incredibly have high IQs in other areas. So it doesn't correlate overall with a just cognitive ability. It's just very specific. And through our analysis, we're able to figure out where the weaknesses are, what's not working well, and then we do a specific individual plan for that child to improve that connection improve that weakness, improve the bottom-up lateralization and top-down regulation, and help that child to be less stressed and much more successful in a learning environment.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. That was a great presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed that. We also wanted to share that Dr. Miller is offering $100 off your initial brain assessment. Can you kind of tell what our viewers what that involves, your brain assessment?
Sure. It's about a 2-hour assessment. So when we do that, we have a portal, thehealthy.com. They can come in and fill out their general information. If they've had any other testing, they can upload it. That we can review that. And then we also have cognitive testing and questionnaires to help us, get a better picture on how the brain, the strengths and weaknesses in the brain. And then when the parent comes in with a child, we do a consultation with them. And if they're traveling from out of town, many times we'll do this consultation on the phone before, just to maximize the time when they come in the office. But then we're going to do a physical examination. We're going to look for these primitive reflexes. We're going to look at their brainstem function, cerebellar function, parietal, occipital, temporal, frontal cortex. We have 4 different stations that look at different parts of the brain. We have the right eye, which checks visual tracking. We have something called the balance tracks, which checks their balance of the vestibular system. We do the interactive metronome, which evaluates 14 different hand, foot coordinations through sound. And then we do a brain map, QEEG brain map. And then we get all that information, we put it together, and we come up with a game plan on how to improve the child.
Yeah. So every program is customized to the child based upon their results through your
Absolutely.
assessment. That's great. So also you are offering a free book for your Saving Your Brain book on Amazon. So it's if you visit the website, you'll be able to click in Restore Brain and be able to download a copy of the book. If you send us an email, info@Saving Your Brain, we can also send you a link to the book as well. So reach out to Dr. Kelly Miller. He has the 3 different locations in Kansas City, Tampa, and Naples. And is all locations available for treatment right now, ready to go for parents to come in and consult and meet with you?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
because of this learning, many times the parents have it, and even the grandparents have it. And really, these imbalances, if they're big enough, they're an increased risk for early dementia and Alzheimer's. So,
Right. Yeah. So
having if you have a big brain imbalance when you're 10 years old, as you continue to age, these things can get worse. And I think really one of the common things, 2 common things occur, that is anxiousness and sleeping issues, which are compounded as we grow older and creating more and more brain stress.
For sure. And I love your program because it is a drug-free program. Many of your patients, you are actually help them get off medications, correct?
Yeah. So we have, lots of times with children, and lots of times children are misdiagnosed. They may not have, they may have a attention focus problem, and it may not be ADHD. It could be from a left brain weakness like we see in dyslexia. So what one of the things we do, we look at the different neurotransmitters in the brain. And this is the most common thing that people do. They give them Adderall, which is a stimulant. It's an amphetamine. Or they may give them an SSI inhibitor because they're anxious. And so those are really, drugs just work on single pathways. The inhibitor, they stimulate a certain thing from happening. And really, it's much more involved with that. They may have a little chemical imbalance, but usually it's more a network problem and a systems problem. but maybe our patients, once they get on a proper balance and they get a little supplementation for their weaknesses, then the medications are no longer necessary.
Okay. Oh, that's great news. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Now, again, please do reach out to savingyourbrain.com, info@savingyourbrain.com, and you can schedule a telehealth consultation with Dr. Miller. He has 3 locations, and reach out to us, and he's ready to help you. Okay. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Charm.
Thanks.